Now we have Nina Lauc from Glycan Age. We've heard a good deal about epigenetic clocks at this meeting, but this is a very unusual clock. Oh, hang on, who's this? Oh, yes, it's not. Oh, yes, that's right. I remember now. Nina said that she was going to probably need to be replaced by a colleague from her company. So,
thank you very much. Just find my clicker. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you to the organizers for this amazing conference, of course. And I'm not Nikolina Lauc. I'm replacing her today, but I'm just as excited to actually share all the amazing progress our team of glycobiologists has made. And actually, we will be continuing the topic of inflammaging, and we will look at basically what glycans have to say about inflammaging. And I'm super excited to share all of this, but first, let's look into the problem. And I don't think this surprises any of you, but we're living longer, and we're not actually living healthier. And today, on average, we're living 20 years longer than our predecessors in the 1960s. And we, during the last 4 days, actually understood that our lifespan will be increasing and increasing in the coming years due to all of these amazing advances. But there is another problem, and this is actually into our health span. And what we know is that even in the most advanced and long-living populations, our health span is still 10 to 15 years shorter than our lifespan. So the extra years of life that we gain, we don't really spend them in good health. And we need to solve that. And again, this is a non-surprising conclusion. We need to solve this through prevention. And we actually know that doing prevention properly will lead to amazing results. Based on what the World Health Organization has to say, 80% of heart disease, of stroke, of diabetes can be prevented. And similar is the case with 40% of all types of cancer. Now, if we manage to prevent these diseases from happening, which is like real prevention, we can achieve amazing results, and our health span will definitely improve. What we know now is that our current preventative methods are mostly focused on early detection and diagnostic, and I don't want to undermine this because they're saving millions of lives every year. And with my mother, for example, she was diagnosed with a very early stage of breast cancer. It was during a routine checkup, so thankfully, it was caught early. She got the right treatment, the right therapy, so she's in remission now. But her life changed, and her mental and physical health will never be the same. Now, imagine if we could actually prevent this disease from ever happening, if we can catch the risk factors very early, and if we can do something to prevent this and to make sure that this never actually happens. And to do that, we will need huge changes in our healthcare systems. We will also need a shift in our mindset and our behavior. But firstly, we will need to understand why are these diseases happening and what is the root cause. And we know that disease starts with aging. Our body starts aging first, then we start developing diseases, and then we become frail. Now, current systemic prevention is mostly focused on the orange, yellowish part of this graph, while proper prevention, real prevention, could happen actually in the green part of this graph, which means that we can effectively keep our bodies younger for longer, which is what we've been talking about in the last 4 days, and keeping our bodies younger for longer will make sure that we address one of the biggest risk factors of most of the deadliest diseases, and that's age and aging. Now, today we understand aging better than ever. We know that there are 12 hallmarks of aging. We also know that chronic inflammation, it was currently added to these 12 hallmarks, and it is a very prominent hallmark. And based on latest research, it is also in a very complex interplay with all of the other hallmarks of aging. Now we go even beyond that, and what we know is that chronic inflammation is very, very dangerous. And I actually have bad news for all of you, and we know that 3 out of 5 people, 3 out of 5 of you, 3 out of 5 of people globally will die due to chronic inflammation. Now we'll repeat that, like 3 out of 5 of everyone who's here will die due to chronic inflammation unless we do something. And why is that? Well, chronic inflammation is a driving factor of most of today's diseases. These are cardiovascular, metabolic diseases, neurological, pulmonary, but also a whole array of autoimmune diseases, and of course, cancer. They're all driven by chronic inflammation, and we need to make sure that we detect and prevent chronic inflammation and find a way to do that. Now, we also know that what gets measured gets managed, and that's why we need to find a good way to measure aging and chronic inflammation. And again, we've been discussing this topic extensively during the last 4 days, and we've done tremendous progress into that in the last years. Now, still, there are some limitations. Current biomarkers of aging are somehow limited, so not all of them are responsive to lifestyle changes. They're highly variable to repeat testing, so sometimes they will give very different results if you take it today and tomorrow, which of course won't be very good. Most of them don't focus on chronic inflammation, and then a lot of the biomarkers we have, they will detect changes when it's a bit too late, which is not good for prevention. But our team of glycobiologists spent the last 20, 30 years researching actually a very interesting molecule that I will discuss in a bit. And they found that actually this is a molecule that has a lot to do with inflammaging and can make prevention possible. Now, if I ask you whether you've heard about glycans, most probably you haven't, or most probably, if you have, you've stopped at our stand outside and you've heard about glycans now, but it's not something that is very much studied during medical school or even in the scientific community. But what are glycans? So glycans, they enable the multicellular life. They're complex carbohydrates, and they exist on every cell surface. Now, they also develop together with proteins and lipids. But why do we care about glycans? In a nutshell, while you most probably haven't heard about these molecules, glycans actually, they're a good measure of inflammation. We measure glycans on immunoglobulin G, and what we know is that they are pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory glycans. And based on that, we can detect chronic inflammation, and we know that this happens much, much earlier than disease manifests. But before I dive deeper into the very exciting world of glycans, just a very quick distinction, because we have this confusion very, very often. And this is the difference between glycation and glycosylation. Now, what we know about glycation is that it's random and non-regulated process, and to be fair, our glycan biomarker does not really care about glycation. This is not what we measure. What we measure and what we're focused on is glycosylation. Now, glycosylation is controlled and regulated, and this is the process where glycans are added to lipids and proteins. And actually, no lipids and proteins can be complete and functional without glycans. So glycans are actually very, very important for the normal function of our body. And there are many reasons why we are very optimistic and excited about all of the potential of glycans. But I will start with 3 today, and we'll share them. The first one is that we have extensive research. Our team of glycobiology actually spent years researching glycans. We have 300 peer-reviewed publications and attracted 40 million grant funding. So it's a lot of serious research going into this direction. And what we times and times found, and we're consistently finding, is that actually glycans change up to a decade before people are diagnosed with diabetes, with cardiovascular disease, and with other inflammatory diseases. So actually, glycans start changing way before these diseases develop, and way before any symptoms actually manifest. What else we know, and that's based on an independent study done by University of Edinburgh, and what they found out is that the glycan clock is best at predicting future hospitalization. What this means is that if your glycans show that you have inflammation today, and if you don't do anything, in the next 10 years, there is a higher chance that you will end up in a hospital. Now, this is super powerful, and what we know about other clocks that usually correlate better with chronological age is that sometimes, not sometimes, but usually, they cannot really predict these future health outcomes that well. And that is why we're optimistic about glycan's potential to actually help us in prevention. And third, and that's most probably the most exciting part, is that what we just found in a study published only this year, earlier this summer, is that glycans have the potential to not only tell you that something's wrong and that somewhere in your organism there is chronic inflammation, but they're actually capable of directing you to a focus area and actually telling you where you need to look and what may be the problem. And based on that, we have the potential now to detect or predict more than 70 different diseases and states from a single test that are all listed on this wheel here. But again, the question remains and the challenge remains, and the big question I feel is really how do we use this information in practice, and can glycans actually do something for us in practice and help practitioners and patients and everyone. And I will start actually, before showing this graph, by just putting things into perspective. We will be here for about 30 minutes, or at least I will be here talking to you for about 30 minutes. And while I'm talking, 1,200 people across the globe will die from cardiovascular diseases. That's more or less 3 or 4 times everyone who's been here at the summit will die from cardiovascular diseases only in these 30 minutes. And again, to put it even more into perspective, we know that cardiovascular diseases actually affect 1 in 13 people. And something that was very, very surprising to me personally is that cardiovascular diseases are the biggest killer, and they actually kill more people than cancer, respiratory disease, and HIV together. So it's really a big problem. And recognizing that it is a very big problem, we at Glycan Age decided that we will try and look for something, for a solution that will help us detect the risk of cardiovascular diseases earlier, and of course, to use glycans for that. Now, what we know about cardiovascular events is that they usually occur out of nowhere, in not usually, but sometimes in even seemingly healthy individuals. And the risk factors for most cardiovascular diseases are kind of obvious. Well, we have the high cholesterol and high blood pressure, and we have a whole array of lifestyle factors, which are like stress, smoking, alcohol, and so on and so forth. But what researchers found is that heart attacks in half of the population occur in people with actually normal cholesterol levels. So they went on and they started researching and wondering, okay, if cholesterol is fine, then what would be the reason? And what they found is that it's actually, again, chronic inflammation. And that chronic inflammation puts people in higher and higher risk of developing any cardiovascular diseases. So what we are trying to do now, and what not only us, but practitioners and researchers and scientists are trying to do now, is find a way to detect this inflammation early, before there is a heart attack, before there is a cardiovascular disease that is developing. And there is a lot of work going on in this regard, and there are some biomarkers that are already widely used. The most famous one is the C-reactive, the high-sensitivity C-reactive protein. So what we know is that high levels of high-sensitivity C-reactive protein mean that your body is inflamed. However, we also know that high-sensitivity C-reactive protein is an acute inflammatory protein. This means that for you to use this biomarker to detect chronic inflammation, you will need to measure it at many different time points, which of course is not optimal and makes this tool imperfect. But there are other elements of this tool that make it imperfect. For example, it won't work for women in menopause. It won't work for women on birth control. So practitioners are using it these days, but they're always using it with caution. Now, what we found based on our research is that glycans actually predict cardiovascular events with higher accuracy by looking into chronic inflammation and detecting this chronic inflammation much, much earlier. And based on another study that again looked into cardiovascular diseases but focused on hypertension, we know that glycans predict incident better than current gold standards and methods of diagnostics. And this study was looking into 2,000 twins in 3 time points over 20 years. So the results were very, very optimistic and promising. Now, what this all means for us is that basically glycans have the potential to revolutionize how we prevent and detect cardiovascular disease and cardiovascular risks. But the good news is that actually glycan biomarkers go beyond just looking into cardiovascular diseases, but they can outperform current diagnostic markers, and they have the potential to become the new gold standards for other diseases as well. So here we have hypertension on the top that we already discussed. We have ovarian cancer, where we see that glycans actually enhance current diagnostics, so they're used together with current diagnostics. And Parkinson's disease and breast cancer, where we see that glycans alone are a better predictor and a diagnostic tool of these diseases. But again, what glycans tell us is that there is a risk. And this risk means that, well, maybe you will develop a disease in 5 years' time or in 10 years' time. And then the question that we keep on asking, and most probably you are asking, is what does this mean for all of us now? Is there something that we can do today so that those diseases actually don't occur? Now, I'm sure you've heard a lot of different interesting findings during these last 4 days, and maybe I will disappoint you when I say that what we found and what is one of the key factors for affecting glycans is actually lifestyle. And why is that? Well, it's because lifestyle actually is one of the biggest causes of chronic inflammation. We know that when your lifestyle is out of balance, it leads to dysregulated repair mechanism. And when we say out of balance, it means that it could be your exercise routine, your hormones, your sleep, diet, stress. Any of these can be very dangerous, can lead to dysregulated repair mechanism, which can lead to the buildup of chronic inflammation. Now, to put a number on it, based on our glycan research, we know that lifestyle accounts for more than 60% of our lifespan and how we age. Genetics is only 40%, so it's really all in our hands, and lifestyle can be a very powerful tool to change that and to prevent many of the diseases. But again, if it's so easy, why don't we just find the best lifestyle, research it, develop it, like Brian Johnson's blueprint that we saw a bit before, and then why don't we just make sure that everybody, everywhere across the world, follows this lifestyle, and then everybody is healthy and they don't develop diseases, and we're all good. Well, if I ask you now to just look around and look at the person who is sitting next to you, and if I ask you, okay, do you think that you look like each other, that your body is enough, that you have similar mindset, or you have similar bodies? I'm sure that the question will be no, and you will be absolutely right, because there is no standard human, and because there is no standard human, we cannot find a standard lifestyle that will work for all. What we know based on our research is that for some people, diet will be most important. For other people, it will be stress that is the biggest factor that is driving chronic inflammation and is leading to diseases. So it's really, really very personalized. And we're all unique. And our uniqueness is in our genetics, epigenetics, metabolism, environment, sex. And what is good is that glycans actually will integrate all of these, and they will be a very good measure of your unique response to lifestyle changes. And because of that, we're confident to say that we can revert decades of glycan aging through lifestyle changes. And we're confident because, well, we've done the research, and we've published it, and based on our research, we know that glycans and Glycan Age show responsiveness to many different lifestyle and pharmacological interventions. And now if you're wondering what type of research this is, well, for example, we went on and started looking for the perfect diet for aging, longevity. We wanted to test and find, oh, we've heard Mediterranean diet is the best. Would this be a Mediterranean diet? Would it be a keto diet? What would that be? So what we expected to find is that some diets will show clear improvements and other diets will show clear declines. But unfortunately for us, we didn't find that. What we found is that every metabolism actually requires a different diet, and every diet should be tailored to every different person. And actually, Dubravko here, who has taken the Glycan Age biomarker, experienced this firsthand. So when we first met him, he was chronologically 47 years old, and he tested his glycans. And what they showed is that actually there was a lot of chronic inflammation in his body. And he came up as 55-year-old in Glycan Age. Now, he was dedicated to improve that, and he went on a journey full of lifestyle changes. So he set up a regular sleep routine, he made a lot of changes in his diet, cutting carbs, cutting alcohol, adding more vegetables. He started meditation, for example, so a lot of changes. And luckily, all these changes actually led to improvement, and his lifestyle seemed to be again in balance, with his chronic inflammation decreasing and his Glycan Age dropping below his chronological age. And at the end, we can see that he was 49 chronologically, and his Glycan Age was 37. Now, Dubravko, in a way, he knew that something is not right, because he was not feeling his best when we first met him. On the other side, we had Anastasis, and Anastasis is a yoga instructor, a health coach, someone who is like sure that his lifestyle was perfect. Like, he came and he was like, there is no way that I'm not younger, I'm sure that everything I'm doing is correct. What he was doing is that he was on a keto diet, he was fasting every day, he was training 8 hours a week, so he really felt that that's great. He's following all of the advice that he finds. We did the test, and as you can see here, he also came up with a higher result, and he was 45 while he was chronologically only 37. Now, this shocked him at first, but then he also was dedicated to change that, and he went on a journey of making some lifestyle choices. So instead of sticking to his keto diet, he started adding some fruits. Instead of fasting every day, he decided he will fast only 4 days a week. And then he also changed his exercise routine. He added some strength training, and he increased the intensity. And again, what we see is a dramatic drop into his Glycan Age, which also shows that basically there is a decrease in the chronic inflammation in his body. And from 45, he went back to 28. And then, of course, he kept his lifestyle, and then we see that he maintained his result as well. But I'm sure that many of you here are also like Anastasis, and you feel that your lifestyle is perfect, and maybe that's correct, and maybe you will come up with a lower result, and we will see that there is not much chronic inflammation in your body. Well, the truth is that sky is the limit when it comes to lifestyle changes, and we saw that with Dr. Nick Angerer, and when we first met him, he was 35 chronologically, and he had a very good result. He was 30 in Glycan Age, which meant that there is not much chronic inflammation in his body. He, however, was dedicated. He still wants to improve. He wants to push and actually decrease his chronic inflammation further. And what he did was he decided to implement just one change. And he introduced more than 30 locally sourced and organic plants per week in his diet. Just that. Everything else remained the same. And in only 3 months, for just 3 months, the levels of chronic inflammation in his body went down, and we saw a decrease in his Glycan Age to 24. And then he decided to stick to this, as it seemed that it was working for him. And in a year, we saw that this result actually he maintained it, and it remained the same. Now, this is a sample of one, so we really cannot say whether what Dr. Nick Angerer did will work for all of you, or for me, or for whoever. But what we can see is that Glycan Age and glycans are responsive to these lifestyle changes, and they can really help us find what works for everyone, and they can help us bring our body in balance, decreasing chronic inflammation early. Now, we set on a mission on finding something that can help us prevent diseases before ever happening. So to prevent cancer and cardiovascular diseases before they manifest and we need to heal them. And I'm very confident and optimistic that we actually found this in glycans, as they're a very accurate, like most accurate inflammaging clock we have so far. And they're also the best predictor of future health outcomes. So now I really hope that you also see the potential, which is, of course, needs a lot more research. So we're inviting you to join us, to come to our stand, to talk to us on how we can collaborate and to work together with us, as we feel like this is something that can really help our prevention and, of course, our longevity. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, you were definitely a very appropriate substitute for Nina. So we've got time for a couple of questions, if there are any. Oh yeah, sorry, right in front of you.
Do you ever find occasions when this doesn't work, when someone gets a certain biological age result, makes healthy lifestyle changes, and then their biological age, their glycan age increases?
Well, so far we haven't, but of course your glycan age will be affected by your lifestyle and also medical conditions. What we see is that if your lifestyle is good, if you improve your lifestyle, if you treat any medical conditions that you may have, we will see an improvement.
There's one right over there.
Okay, thank you. Hello, thank you for your speech. Maybe first one remark and then my question. When life expectancy was still rising until 2019, it was generally considered that for 4 years of life expectancy, you have 3 years of good health, you know? So it's not like when you have more life expectancy, you have less good health. Okay, sure. And hopefully it will be the situation again when the life expectancy will be rising again. But now, when I see that you say that there are people who win, let's say, 20 years of biological age in 2 years. When I see that, in my opinion, it probably means that the way you measure the biological age is just not correct. But so I want to know, when you say that, so these two people you were showing the biological age, it's biological age measured by your system, glycan, or it's or also biological age measured by other systems, you know, like grip strength and so on. Because if there is no change in the other ways to measure, like grip strength, it's a very good predictor for life expectancy, and so, yeah.
What we're looking here is glycans, so it's glycan age, and let's say that what glycans are, they're age of your immune system, because we're measuring glycans or immunoglobulin G. So based on what we measure, we can see the age of your immune system. And when we say that someone is, let's say, 20 in glycan age, this means that they have the immune system of a 20-year-old. But this is glycans per se. This wouldn't mean that this is epigenetic or some other aging clock. So every aging clock measures something different, and what we were presenting is purely glycans.
Yeah, actually, let me follow up on that, because, of course, the immune system is an enormously pervasive component of the body, and you know, if your immune system is made substantially younger, one might hope that there will be very widespread knock-on effects on other parts of the body. So, what data do you have at this point on, well, basically on the question that Didier asked, on whether people that have a dramatic, well, a substantial reduction in glycan age do also have, you know, measures of rejuvenation by other measures?
Most often we see this. So most often we will see someone who has a lower glycan age, that they're also using other aging clocks. They also will have very good results. But there are, of course, exceptions. And we're still doing immense research on trying to find whether there is actually a correlation, whether all of these clocks can be used together. And I believe that there was one research where someone tried to use all of the clocks together, and it really didn't really help. It was a great measure of chronological age, but it wasn't a very good predictor of future health.
Yeah, and I guess you also have the problem that you haven't been doing this for very long, so the longitudinal data that you have is only a few years in each case.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly.